First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Dennis Kelly. I'm a resident here in the city of Long Beach. My home is just 2 blocks down on West Fulton. And like probably all of you, myself and Denis, at my house, I also have an office that is at 100 West Park Avenue. It's actually on National Boulevard between the AT&T store and the Beach Nails. And I took about a foot of water in the office as well. I just want to describe to you how this came about in general before I start introducing our speakers. My goal, my hope is that this is going to be informative on several different fronts. I have a feeling a lot of your questions will be answered. I also know that some of your questions may not be answered. I also know that some of your questions are so fact-specific as to your properties that it may not be addressed the way you want it to be here tonight. But having said that, I think it's going to be an informative presentation. I guess the first, probably December 1st, I'm lying in bed with my wool cap on, and my wife is on the iPad because we have power, but we don't have heat or hot water. I have a new appreciation for New York State Troopers, for the sponge bath, and for space heaters. That's probably number one. So Eileen, my wife, turns to me with the iPad and shows me an article from the Huntington Patch. And I figured, what is she showing me a Huntington Patch for? And it's an article about an attorney, who's here this evening, who came up at the invitation of the Huntington Town Council to talk about insurance issues and hurricanes and claims issues relative to hurricanes. And he came up from Louisiana, having had extensive experience with Katrina, Ike, Gustav, and most recently Isaac. And he was answering questions up in Huntington. And I said to Eileen, and I said to myself, what the hell is he doing in Huntington? We got to get him down here. And one of the reasons why I felt like that is being a practicing attorney myself and dealing with insurance companies, I knew that we were about to hit what I've been referring to as the 7th level of hell. We were going to have to start to deal with insurance companies, and insurance adjusters, and contractors, and home mortgage companies. And we were going to have to try to coordinate these things and understand them. And even though I'm a practicing attorney, and Eileen and I have been diligent in trying to gather as much information as we possibly can, our heads are spinning. And as I stand here before you today, my head's still spinning. We're getting there, we're starting to learn a lot, but it's overwhelming. And I figure if it's overwhelming for me, the people of the city are going to feel equally as overwhelmed, if not more so. And so I called John Houghtaling's office in Louisiana and said, I'd love for him to come to Long Beach. His assistant was good enough to give me his email, and I wrote him a quick note about the 7th level of hell. And he called me about 10 days later, because he travels a great deal, and said, yes, you have hit the 7th level of hell. And I also knew, and this was, I just guess from watching television about other disasters, that eventually the state troopers were going to go away, the National Guard was going to go away, the politicians were going to go away, and we were going to be left sitting on our own crap. And we were going to have to do something about it, and we were going to have to educate ourselves and try to fight through this. I think we have a long way to go. But, so John said, I would love to come to Long Beach. So, after having met him a couple of times, I finally was able to arrange this. I'm glad we got a big enough space. I had a feeling that we'd get a decent turnout. So I didn't want to take questions right now because I want to get to the meat and potatoes, and we're going to take as many questions as we can before we have to leave. Let me introduce to you, with this introduction, John W. Houghtaling, who is the managing partner, and majority owner of Houghtaling and Williams, the firm which has offices in New Orleans and Houston, specializes in insurance litigation. Houghtaling concentrates on disaster recovery law. In 2005, he was hired by the Attorney General of Louisiana to protect policyholder rights in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Following Hurricanes Ike and Katrina, he also garnered over $100 million in settlements and verdicts for affected property owners. And along with John will be Jeffrey Major, a claims adjuster, and they're going to take you through their presentation now. John, Jeff.
So I want to thank you for the welcome. I'm sorry to see so many people here tonight. Although I welcome being here, I do a lot of these speeches now, and it seems I'm doing more and more of them around the country because people are affected, like you, by these natural disasters, and there's a lot of confusion out there. And so I have been going around, and some of the things I'll speak to you tonight about are some general things, some general tips that you need to know to protect yourselves. Now, Dennis asked why I was in Huntington. I actually grew up in Huntington. Originally both my parents were born in Brooklyn, and I lived in Huntington until I was 11 years old. And my family relocated me to New Orleans, where I became a lawyer. I took over the practice of my mentor about 6 months before Katrina hit. So we had about 36 employees, and our courthouse was knocked out. Nearly all of us lost our homes. And there was a lot of confusion. There was a fog of war, where in the aftermath of all of this, even my firm, which was well known and been in business for over 40 years, there was a lot of things we didn't know about what the insurance companies were doing with claims handling. The Attorney General of Louisiana didn't know. A lot of us didn't know. And that was because the rules were being rewritten by the insurance companies. And even though we were experienced lawyers in dealing with insurance, things were changing. They were preparing for disasters like this while you were paying your premiums. And so the Attorney General of Louisiana retained me to file some cases on behalf of all policyholders, to set what the rules were or what the rules should have been in these situations. And what we have found, there was a lot of litigation as a result of Katrina. And there was more law that was written in those 3 years after Katrina than in 30 years before on claims handling. And some of the things that we learned I want to share with you tonight. But before I go into those things that you need to know, there's things that you need to understand about the game of insurance so that you understand when you find yourself in some of these positions where they're coming from. You know, we appropriately said the Pledge of Allegiance. Our country, one of the founding fathers of our country, Benjamin Franklin. Many people know him for lots of things, discovering electricity, things like that. A lot of people don't know that when they were putting together America and trying to found a better nation, that Benjamin Franklin founded the first insurance company in America in 1752 with a group of volunteer firemen. Fire was a big problem in colonial America, and when someone would lose their home and everything, it was disastrous for those people. So Benjamin Franklin went around with a bunch of volunteer firemen, and he said, look, here's what we're going to do. Everybody's going to pay in a little in case someone was in need. And that's how insurance started. But over the years, things changed, and big business took over. And now, the game has been rigged. Now, is there any insurance adjusters, people working for the insurance company in the house? Okay, because I'm going to tell some of their secrets tonight, and hopefully give you guys some things on how to deal with them. But I want to You know, you guys have probably been very, very surprised about things in your policies, things you thought you were covered for that you weren't. And there's a reason for that. It's because the game of insurance, by design, over the last 20 years, has been changed. And the business of insurance is huge. So the reason that you may be confused is because of ads by insurance companies. How many, anybody want to guess how much Allstate spent last year on its ads? Over $700 million of policy premium money, advertising that they'd be in good hands. State Farm spent $700 million last year battling Allstate because they wanted to promise that if you needed them, they'd be your good neighbor. And so it doesn't come as a surprise that when you pick up the phone and you call your claims department, because that's what we think of it as. We think of it as our claims department. We call the adjuster and he comes out. That's what we've been paying premiums for. And that's what they advertised we were supposed to get, that it was supposed to be us. They're on our side. The umbrellas, the good hands, the good neighbors. But when you call the insurance company, you're calling an employee that comes to your house, and the better he does inspecting your home, the more his boss loses money. That's our system. And the system's broken. But after disaster, people are surprised by this or how they are going to treat you because you paid your premiums on time. But I want you to think about, go back to the time when you bought your home or your apartment or your condo. How many people made sure they got an inspection before they paid for it? You got an independent inspection, right? I mean, imagine, go back to that time right before you bought your property. Imagine that if the seller came to you and said, wait a second, you don't need to inspect it. I'll inspect it for you. And look, if I find anything wrong with it, it'll come out of my end of the deal. You'd look at them like they were crazy or that they were going to cheat you. You would automatically, your antenna would go up. Now, why is it that that doesn't happen when we call our claims department? And it's because of those promises. It's because of all of those years. So the first thing, and I've got these 5 things you need to know. The first thing you need to know is how the insurance game works. And that you need to get an independent inspection. Now we'll talk about later, we'll talk about how you can get that. But the first thing you need to know is you cannot rely upon what your insurance adjuster, what you think of as your insurance adjuster, it's the guy whose pocket the money's coming out of. You can't rely upon what he tells you. Not for the amount of your damages, not about your exclusions. I've heard horror stories. I hear them a lot. You know, I go around the country to different hurricanes and disasters, and I see the same thing. I've heard some of the worst stories here. And part of it is the insurance companies are getting smarter in how to save money. And then I also think that part of it is because there hasn't been many hurricanes in the New York area in a while. That there hasn't been a lot of litigation yet on the defining of what the rules and the games are. And so the laws are a little bit confusing. Now, some of the things that we learned in Katrina, we think, I believe, are going to be persuasive because there's a lot of unanswered questions about how things work. But the first thing that you need to know is that you need to get an independent inspection. Now, how do you do that? There's different ways you can do it. You can get a licensed contractor. That's really your best thing, is to get the person that's actually going to do the work to do the inspection for you. Because your insurance adjuster can say anything he wants about the damage. He's guessing, and he has a conflict of interest. So you can right away. But you need to get, now the problem that you run into in these situations is that, finding a licensed contractor is difficult because of all the work that's there. But it's important that's the first place that I would go if you can, because that's the person that's actually going to do the work. Now, I would be careful from people from out of town that come in that are contractors, because you have to be careful. A contractor, remember, he can lien your house. He can put a mortgage, he can put a lien on the mortgage, but preempts a mortgage under your house. So you have to be careful of that. Contractors also, some of the things you have to be careful of is contractors will come out and they want your business, right? They want to be the lowest estimate. And they try to do that because they want your business. Now, how many times have we done a renovation and it actually been the exact amount that the contractor told us? It's many times, sometimes it's 2 or 3 times as much. So you have to be careful of that, and you have to have a discussion with your contractor to tell him, look, I need you to do, and I'm going to use you, I want to use you, but I need you to give me an estimate of my worst case scenario, not the best, my worst case scenario in this. So that's the best thing to do. You may need an engineer if you have foundational things. There are also estimators, and there are public adjusters that are out there that you can go to that do this professionally. So that is one of the things that's really important. Now, the second thing that you need to know is that you are entitled to an unconditional payment. So those of you who may have checks that you have right now that you're holding on to because you don't agree with the amounts, you can cash those. If they don't have a release on it, you can cash that money. Your insurance company, you have paid premiums for your policy, under your policy. And for those premiums, the insurance company is not allowed to say, well, you have to sign a release before you get the check. They have to send you the check unconditionally. So that's number 2. Now the third, a lot of insurance companies, as part of the way they play the game, is they delay, they deny, and they defend. And a lot of them will tell you that you're excluded, they'll lowball you on payments, and the hope is that they wait you out enough that the federal government will come and pay the amounts and bail things out. That's what they really want you to do. They want to wait you out. And this is part of a game. Now, under New York law, there is a statute. It hasn't been checked in a while, it hasn't been litigated in a while, and it's not as good as others in other states. But there is a statute which talks about the timeline on when they're supposed to pay you. There's actually deadlines. The law is, and I have in here, to know the 15-day rule. Here's what the law says. The law says that within 15 days of them knowing about your loss, about you making a claim, they're supposed to send to you within 15 days an itemization of everything you need to do for them to assess your claim, to write you a check. They're supposed to do that within 15 days. Now, the law says within 15 days of them receiving that information back, they're supposed to say yes, no, or give you a lesser amount and tell you how much that is. And within 5 days from that, they're supposed to send you a check. That's what the law is. Now, how many people experience that? By a show of hands, none. I'm not surprised. You did? Okay. One. Well, there's a difference between, and we're going to get to it, there's a difference between your homeowner's coverage, there's a difference between your flood coverage and your homeowner's coverage, and we're going to talk about those, okay, of why it's different, because the rules are different. This right here applies to your homeowner's coverage, so it's wind damage. Let's go to the next slide. You need to determine your chronology of damage. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, one of the things the insurance companies try to do is they try as best they can to blame it on flood. That's their biggest game. They did this in Katrina. They denied everybody because of flood. Now, in places in New Orleans, there hadn't been a flood in 100 years. And insurance adjusters weren't selling flood policies. The reason insurance companies do that, and they don't properly give you advice about your flood policies, because flood policies are underwritten by the federal government. And the insurance companies know they just get a flat fee for selling it. Agents make more money by selling you homeowners coverage, which has more exclusions in it. So what ends up happening is when there is a disaster like this, in every hurricane that happens, the wind comes first, the wind-driven rain. Then after that, there's a flood. But it usually happens in a short period of time. In Katrina, something different happened because we had the flood and the wind separated by 2 days because the levees broke. So what ended up happening was we had all those news cameras. You guys probably were watching it on television. All the news cameras took pictures, aerial photographs of all the houses and everything in New Orleans. And we were able to go back and see what type of damage was done by wind before there's a flood. And that was one of the first times we got more science out of that than we had in other places. And the reason that's important is because there's a difference between, as you guys probably know now, there's a difference between wind and flood. And the games are different. So what the insurance companies generally do is they want to exclude everything as flood, whether you have a flood policy or not. Why? Because they're off the hook if that happens. And they did that widespread in New Orleans. Many people thought, the insurance companies after Katrina, they went around and they told the insurance commissioner of Louisiana, you've got to raise the rates because of all this money. Because rates are connected, how much we have to pay out is connected to how much rates are, right? And they did that. Surprises many people that because of the exclusions that they were able to get away with, that the year of Katrina, they made a record, the casualty property insurance industry made a record profit of $50 billion that year. The year after, when they were supposed to be paying the claims in Katrina, they made another 30-year record of $72 billion. And the way they did that was this. They blame it all on flood. If they are able to blame it all on flood, they don't have to pay, the government has to pay. Even if you have the policies, because the policy is written by your government. And if they have to pay, if it's flood, they don't have to follow that 15-day rule or the 30-day rule or in different ways. So they try to do that. Now, many of us were surprised about flood and the exclusions that were in our policies. And there's a lot of myths out there. And the insurance companies, I have seen them lie. I've seen them create insurance fraud in rewriting estimates to say that it's flood when actually they know it was wind. In Katrina, we caught them because of the 2 days the levees broke and you had the flood come in later. And we were able to see what wind really did and how floods sometimes mask the coverage of what happens to your home. You got to think of your house, and your house is a pitched roof. Buildings, homes, condos, they're waterproof from the top down. They're not waterproof from the sides. They're water resistant. Like your cell phone's water resistant, but if you drop it in the tub, what happens? Well, this is what happens. This is what happened in Hurricane Sandy. And Hurricane Sandy was kind of a unique storm because there was so much wind-driven rain. And it's like if you imagine your house with the roof and the gutters channeling the water, it's all designed to be waterproof from the top down. But imagine you took your house and you turned it on its side, and it rained on your house for 3 days. Well, that's what happened in Hurricane Sandy. The sides of all of your homes have gotten soaked, and they're not waterproof, they're water resistant. So the walls are wet, between the windows are wet. Now the insurance company knows this. They know this science. But what they do is they go in and they know if they can blame it on flood, even if they sold you a flood policy, they don't pay it. You know, sometimes Allstate, they'll sell you a flood policy and then they'll sell you a homeowner's policy. But they only get the adjusters only get a little fee for just selling that policy. They don't make most of their money. So they push the wind coverage and generally not flood. And then if they come in there, they actually adjust the claims for the federal government. So anything they can dump in the flood bucket, they don't pay for, the government pays for. And I've seen a lot of fraud with this. And that goes back to my first primary thing. You got to get your independent inspection. Because this wall, the water will come through and be wet. If I took a moisture meter and I went around this, I bet you this would be wet. I bet you would find water because it's not designed to be waterproof. Now, what the insurance companies will do is they'll come in and they'll draw a line and they'll say anything below this line is flood, anything above this line will be wind. That's civilly illegal to do. But they do it. Because if this whole wall got wet all the way down to the carpet before the flood came, it's covered. If you have a good inspection, then you can find some of the things out. That's why the chronology of damage is very, very important for you to remember that this is something that is very, very crucial in determining what bucket it goes into. If it goes into the flood bucket, the federal government is immune from the delay, the deny, the defend. If it goes into the wind bucket, now your insurance company has a duty to you. They have a duty to you to pay you on time. They have a duty to pay you unconditionally. And if they don't, which they very, very rarely do, then you can have rights against them if you get your inspections itself. So there are people that are out there that can help. Like I said, first thing I would do is go to contractors. The second that you need to do is if you can't find a contractor, I would go to, there's public adjusters that are out there that can analyze your damage. But that's the most important thing, is to go out there, do your own inspections, and hold the insurance companies accountable for the timeline. And don't assume that what they called flood was really flood, or that it didn't mask any damage from wind. How many people have been denied because of basements, or heard people in basements? Oh my goodness. Okay. And how many of those people have actual bought flood coverage, but aren't being paid? And they're telling you that you're denied, right? From my understanding of the law, and what I believe is going to be the law eventually in New York, is that you're going to be covered 100% with insurance. Because your agent who went out there and sold you that flood policy, he looked at your damage, or he was supposed to look at your first floor. You didn't buy flood coverage for your roof. You bought it for your first floor. And they went and they sold you a policy to cover your first floor. And I bet you if you look at your policy, it's for the amount that it would cost to restore your first floor. And for years, you paid premiums for that coverage. And your agent sold you that policy. Now, when you go to collect on that policy you've been paying premiums on, he says, oh, I'm sorry, the policy I sold you doesn't cover you. Well, what's going to happen here is that this is a game that the insurance companies play. Because remember, if they can deny you and push you off to the federal government and to FEMA and say, I'm sorry, you're not covered, then the government may bail them out. They may get off of the hook. If you have a basement and you have bought flood coverage, your agent sold that to you, your agent insurance company will step in the shoes of what your policy should have been. So you need to call your agent and ask your agent for his insurance company, because that's where you send your claim. So what I'll do now is I'll open it up for questions, I think, if we'd like. And I guess we'd step up, if you don't mind stepping up to the microphone. I'll try to ask questions. Now, the questions that I'm going to answer, this is not, understand I have to make this disclaimer that this is not specific legal advice to your case. This is going to be general information. I have to make this disclaimer. I will tell you that for those of you that have specific questions that you don't have answered here tonight, you can go to, I have a questionnaire on my website. If you submit the question to us, we will do our best to answer it. So it's, if you go to, there was a handout that's www.ghwlegal.com. And if you go to that website, you can go to online, and we will answer those questions in a first come, first served basis if we don't get to here tonight. So, okay.
I have a foundation and slab problems, crack foundation, crack slab. Had
Jeff.
Insurance company engineer come in, and my own engineer come in, obviously my engineer, contractor, plumber, FEMA, and the SGA all agreed with our findings. Of course, the insurance company engineer said that it was pre-existing. I don't know if it was a ball or something, I don't know, but how do I, what's my next step? What should I do?
Well, what you need to first understand is that your insurance company does not have the legal right to be the last decision on that. What they say, they have an automatic conflict of interest there. So what you need to do is you need to send it to them. You need to send their report. Okay, if they believe that they're going to, a lot of times, this is the other game that they'll play with you, is they will claim that damage was pre-existing. This is a common game that they do to reap their profits. But what you need to do is you need to assert that, and you need to tell them, here's my licensed estimator, and if it's under your homeowner's policy, which is your wind policy, you tell them you want a response within 15 days because you've given them the information. If they don't, and you need to record when you send the insurance company information, because when they always miss the deadlines. After they miss the deadlines, you may have, after those 15 days elapse, you can hire a lawyer, and if the insurance company is held to be in bad faith, and generally when they deny and then they miss the deadline, just missing the deadline is bad faith. If they don't have a reasonable explanation and it's just a delay or they just haven't gotten to you, then there's an argument that it's bad faith. You get penalties and attorney's fees on top of that. So the first thing I would do is you send it to them. You tell them, I'm expecting you to respond to this in 15 days, to tell me yes or no. And then if they deny it, then you can hire an attorney. Now, generally, you will find public adjusters and attorneys that will do things on a contingency fee. Okay, so you don't have to outlay the money when you hire that. And in a lot of cases where there's in the cases that we found where there's bad faith, then the insurance company will and many times be able to pay for those fees.
Before I ask this specific question, could you just clarify what you're saying about basements? Because I think you get from FEMA, that shows about levels, it says
Yes.
nothing below ground is covered except the washer and dryer. So what should be covered?
Everything should be covered. You should be covered for, if you have a flood policy for the first floor, all of it should be covered. And what the insurance company is telling you about the exclusions and stuff, and that you have no insurance coverage for this, is not true. Now, but you have to understand that the policy that you were sold by your agent does have those exclusions in it. And there is a case in New York law that it enforces that. So the policy that you were sold for the first floor of your home that they're now calling a basement was worthless. It was an absolute worthless piece of paper that you paid premiums for.
So it's underground, it's still the first floor?
The rule is that if it is a certain grade all the way around the first floor, it's considered a basement. So if you have 12 inches all the way around a first floor, they consider that a basement, and under your policy, it's excluded, the policy you paid premiums for. But understand me that in my view, you have coverage for that, insurance coverage for that. But what happens is, if Jeff here were to sell you, it was your agent and sold you that policy that was worthless, and you paid premiums under that, then he either made a mistake or he stole from you. One of those two things. I've seen both. Sometimes they make a mistake, and sometimes they knew good darn and well what they're selling you. Okay? So they sold you a worthless piece of paper that you were paying premiums for. In that case, Jeff has insurance. So his insurance company will step in the place of your policy, in my view, and should cover you.
So you mean instead of the FEMA flood insurance policy, which probably everybody has,
Correct.
you submit directly to whatever your
The agent. The agent. You go to your insurance agent who sold you the policy, and you write a letter, or you have an attorney or someone write the letter for you, and it says, Mr. Agent, I didn't buy flood coverage for my roof. I didn't buy flood coverage for my second floor of my home. I bought flood coverage for the first floor of my home, and you knew it. And if you're telling me that I don't have coverage for this under my policy, then I have coverage under your policy for my. Okay, so you send me your insurance company. And I can't guarantee anything in life, but I will tell you, anybody that has that problem, if you can't find somebody that will pick that fight for you, I'll pick it for them. Okay?
So he said they took it off all the adjuster's evaluations, all that were handed in. This is something we did. Now, I guess my question is that
no.
What's going to do that?
No.
Because that's, I'm sure everybody
What you need to do is, my first point, you cannot rely, just like you wouldn't rely upon the person that sold you your house to inspect it for you. You cannot rely upon their inspections of your home. That is the most important thing. If you leave here with one thing, that is the absolute most important thing. Because I will tell you this, if you patch your home up, and then later you go to sell your house, you can bet your bottom dollar that the next person that buys your house is going to inspect it. And if you didn't inspect it and those walls are wet, in New York, two things are going to happen. Number one, it's going to freeze and it's going to crack. And in the summer, it's going to mold. And if you have mold, if you don't know it already, it is an exclusion in your policy for mold. So you have to have it inspected yourself. I would take what they say my estimate is, I would take it and I would throw it in the garbage. Because it is a complete conflict of interest what they say. The adjusters, even if you find a guy, and I will tell you, they are trained, I've seen the manuals. They're trained to act like your good neighbor. They're trained to come in there and be nice to you and say, I'm sorry, I'm trying to help you. That's part of their training. But what they're doing is they're responding to home office. Even if you find a guy who is an independent, because they're bringing a lot of independent people out here because they don't have enough adjusters. And they're taking those people, sometimes all of their training is an hour in Burger King. Literally, an hour in Burger King. Under the state statute of New York, the insurance company has written the statute. And the insurance companies are allowed, if you go to Burger King and you work for the insurance company, you can be a licensed adjuster. But somebody like Jeff Major, who's got over 20 years of experience and works on the side of policyholders, he's got all these hoops he's got to go through to be able to get a license. And that's part of the law and part of the things that you're going to face. Another thing that's a little scary and daunting is the fact that because of this insurance lobby in New York and in other places, insurance companies, they're not subject to antitrust laws. Now, what does that mean? That means that insurance executives in the companies, they can all get together and they can collude on prices. They can all tell what we're going to pay for, what we're not going to pay for in New York, how we're going to do our adjustments, what we're going to charge them next time for their policies. And they're able to stifle that. And that's a scary thing. But the reason, because of those laws, you need to take it, their estimate, and throw it away. And go get your own estimate for your damages. You need to get your own. You need to get your own inspections. Then you send it to them. And then you tell them, I'm requiring you to respond to me on time. Now, if you're dealing with your wind coverage, remember, as I said, there's a difference between wind and flood. On your wind coverage, you tell them, once you send them the estimate, you say you have 15 days to say yes or no. And it's this, and you record that date that you send it to them. And if they miss that deadline, then you can go and you can get help. And if they're held in bad faith, the insurance company should pay for 3 days. Unfortunately, because it's by the government, there's no recourse or deadline. Now, the good news about the flood, though, is that most flood policies are administered. Your flood policy, Allstate probably got, how much do they get for selling that policy? Maybe $200 for selling you that policy, something like that. Okay, so they don't really care. Now, what's crazy about this is that the insurance adjuster who's sent out by Allstate, he's the one that decides your wind versus your flood. So when he's looking at, okay, if I put it in one bucket, my boss doesn't pay. If I put it in this bucket, my boss pays. So generally, if you get your own inspection, they'll generally pay you easy on flood because they want to blame everything on flood because they don't pay for it. Now, if you're running into an exclusion like you are, that's very, very different as to the basement. Okay? And if you have any others, like I said, you can go to that website and I'll be glad to answer them specifically.
What's the website again?
The website is ghwlegal.com. It's on that sheet. And I will do my best, first come, first serve, to answer all of your questions the best. We have New York lawyers back there, so I can tell you I can answer specifically your questions without the disclaimer if you go through there. Go ahead. And one other thing, it is correct what Dennis said about the Facebook. If you send your questions to me, they're confidential. If you put them on Facebook or you send them to another thing, the insurance, you could be wrong or you could be underguessing as to what your estimates are. So be careful of that. Sorry.
I have just 2 quick questions for you. I'm the commander of the Veterans Farm Lawyer in Long Beach.
Thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you. And the insurance company that I'm dealing with, which is Chubb Insurance, told me that we have no flood insurance, which we don't. And we have wind insurance. And we have $6,500 worth of damage to the roof. And they estimate that 2% of the value of the building is deductible.
Yes.
So I have a $10,000 deductible.
Yes.
On $6,500.
Yes.
And I said to them, I was there at the VFW when the water was coming down the block. And the water was being driven by the wind.
Yes.
Because we didn't get sand except from the wind that blew into the buildings, all the stores and all the houses here. And everybody has damage, whether they had flood insurance or not. And we saw waves, white waves of swirls coming down the block. Now, should the insurance companies, can we go after them to claim that it is not flood? Because as you say,
it's a very, very good question. And your question has been, your argument was taken up by me and by a lot of people in Katrina. Because a traditional flood didn't happen in Katrina either, the levees broke. But we lost on appeal that issue. So in any way that the flood gets to your place, it's considered to be flood, even though it's driven by wind. However, I would bet you that if you had someone that was very skilled in looking at damage of your home and went through it, the amount of wind-driven rain in this storm was unprecedented. And the side of your home is not waterproof. And I bet you that if somebody went in there with moisture meters, you would be someone good like Jeff, you would likely find a whole lot more than $6,500 worth of damage. You may find $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 of damage that you didn't see because you can't see the water in this wall. You can't see it. And so the adjuster doesn't want to see it. You don't know enough about it because that's probably not your business. And so you have to get somebody else. So my advice to you, I will tell you in Katrina, 95% of my clients were all excluded because of flood. And almost all of them, at the end of it, got enough coverage to fix their house. So that would be my advice to you.
The other question is, in my own home, I have flood insurance, and flood insurance is a payment. But I have also homeowners with contents. And I was in the house also when the water was coming in.
Yes.
And it came up through the sewers first. It came up through the toilet bowl and
Yes.
so then I told the insurance people that the damage was mostly the feces that were coming in
Yes.
the house.
Yes.
Underneath. They said, all in the flood.
Yes. There is general exclusions like that. But again, here's what I'd do if I were you. I'd look at my flood policy that my agent sold me, and I would look to see how much I had in contents. You had zero in contents. You had zero in contents. Okay. Well, in that case, if you bought flood coverage, did you know that you had no contents? Okay. And there is insurance for that. And your agent, if he sold it to you, if you went out and you bought flood coverage for your place, it doesn't make a lot of sense that you would buy flood coverage for your structure and not your contents. And so, again, I would address that question with your agent. And I will tell you, I have seen agents, good ones, if you have a good insurance agent, I have insurance agents say to me, I screwed up. And you're right. And that's what I have insurance for. Okay? Sure. Go ahead.
So,
Okay. Yeah, just answer.
one other thing in this policy, if your water came in through drains or backed up through drains, going back to your homeowner's policy and looking for coverage under backup sewers and drains. A lot of times it's limited, but there's protection coverage there.
I have that, and we have that coverage, but they're denying us because they're saying the flood caused the backup.
If it's, and this is a general thing, if anything having to do with the amount or causation, you can't trust their reports. You throw them away. Forget what they say. You've got to get your own. Theirs don't control. I always tell the insurance companies, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't. It matters what a jury will think. Now, it can matter what you think if we come to an agreement, but otherwise you don't get to say. Okay?
Thank you for being here. If you've received money from the homeowner's policy or the wraparound policy, and you cash the check, it's not all that much, can you still appeal that?
Of course. It's a very good question.
Is there a timeline for that?
It is, in New York, you're going to have about, this is just general information, but you got 2 years. Okay? And you need to write that one down, and I'm glad you asked the question. You got 2 years. After 2 years, if you are still, and most of you will still be fixing your homes or having issues 2 years from now, that 2-year deadline of the storm is one thing you need to calendar. To be safe, if you are still dealing with your insurance company, you must get an attorney and file a lawsuit to preserve your insurance rights, because they expire. They expire in a 2-year deadline. Now, some people will say it's 2 years from the denial, but to be safe, it needs to be 2 years from the storm. So on that date, if you aren't fully and 100% satisfied with what you're going to get, then you have to get an attorney to preserve those particular rights. Now, I will say this. Even though I am an attorney and I litigate for a living, if you have someone that helps you manage this claim process right now, you will be, unfortunately, one among thousands of people that do it right. And if you do it right and the insurance companies deny you illegally, you know, I've seen more insurance fraud in my life by insurance companies than by the other way around. And if they do something that's wrong and they get caught for it, then they can pay. On one claim that was a $400,000 claim they didn't pay, I got $4.7 million when I had to sue them. Now, but I will say that I was involved very early in the process with most of my clients because our courthouse was shut down. I didn't have anything else to do. So I handled insurance claims for people. And I did it on a much, much lower rate than what you normally hire an attorney for, because there wasn't a no yet. Because of the fact that the insurance companies are legitimately overworked right now, there is an advantage that you can get by doing their work for them. And if you get your own inspections and you send it to them and it's in their file and you've documented it with a letter that you're waiting for them and they know you have their number, then generally they'll pay you, because the penalties now, you've now set them up. But if you allow them to say, I need more time, I need more time, I don't have enough information, you didn't send it to me in triplicate, it was on green paper, not blue paper. If you allow them to do that, then what the law is, here's generally what the law is generally, that when they have a sufficient proof of loss and they miss their deadlines, they're liable. Now, what's sufficient proof of loss? We litigate that all the time. It's what's reasonable. If you send them an estimate of your roof and they just don't pay you, and they miss a deadline, and you hold them to the deadline, and they say, well, we need to send somebody else. Well, no, you got my estimate. You need to pay me from your estimate. And they miss that deadline, then you can, and they always miss the deadline. Then later what will happen is if you manage that process, or you have somebody manage that process for you professionally, then you will have leverage on them later.
So I kind of built that when you present receipts, present invoices, or public justice statements after that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Hi, thank you for coming. obviously, is for several feet of water. The flood insurance of the landlord is paying for the building structure. My contents policy, which is about, it's either 150 or something thousand, I had close to $200,000 worth of equipment destroyed. My policy is not paying a penny because of a flood exclusion. On the declarations page of the policy, it lists flood exclusion, and then there is something that refers to flood exclusion endorsement. That's the word I don't understand. And in my mind, an endorsement was something that supersedes the exclusion and gives you coverage against the exclusion, which I found out, in effect, makes my exclusion more restrictive, not less restrictive.
Correct.
Then I was told at that point that I would be covered either for my business interruption insurance because it was all flood predicated, and I'm still not working, it's 2 months. And I was then told that my sewage backup insurance, as the other gentleman from the DFW was told, that because it was flood predicated, that my sewage insurance was not covered. I was then subsequently told, another term that I've never heard of before, that I should have purchased a contents flood policy, which I've never heard of before. I always thought, as in my home, your flood covers the structure of the value, content zero. You then buy a homeowner's or a coverage policy, which covers zero structure, $200,000 contents. I thought I was covered. I couldn't insure something I don't own, so I can't take a policy out of structure. I don't know.
Yes.
What is this contents flood?
Okay. The person that recommended to you, was it your agent that you should have gotten contract coverage?
Yes, I mean, I just went.
And what I would say to him is, why didn't you recommend that to me before? And here's the thing about insurance. Contracts, they're like this thick, and they're written very, very confusing. Even for, I still have to wade through insurance policies. And to give you a specific answer on your particular case, I'd need to see what exactly the policy is, and I'd be glad to do that for you. But here's a general rule about insurance policies and the verbiage. If it is, the insurance companies will always say to you that unless it's clearly in the policy that you have coverage, you don't have coverage. That's a lie. Okay? What it needs to say is that unless it's specifically and unambiguously excluded, you have coverage. Because if you look at the first part of your policy, it's written intentionally to be deceptive. It usually says all risks. You've probably seen that. All risks that you have in there. And then later in the fine print, they find all of these exclusions. So what the law says generally is that if it is ambiguous in your policy, if you can read it 2 ways, one having coverage and one not having coverage, the law in all 50 states is you have coverage. So if it's ambiguous, if your policy is ambiguous, held to be ambiguous, then you'll have coverage. Now, it sounds like you're in a situation where you were very intending to buy, making sure you had certain coverages, making sure that you had business interruption coverage, making sure you had all of these things. And buying an insurance policy is like today, is like trying to do heart surgery on yourself blindfolded, having never gone to medical school. Okay? It's that complicated. Intentionally. It's that complicated. Because they want to sell you something you're not going to use. That's the game of insurance. And so, what you need to do is you need to ask these questions of your agent. Or you need to have somebody ask these questions if it turns out you really are excluded, and I'm not sure that you are, without looking at it specifically, but you need to. Yes. They use this, endorsement sounds like it's something it's going to give you, right? And they do this on purpose. They write the language like this on purpose, okay? And so, but there are laws, like I said, to protect you. And if that's the case, I would ask your agent, I bought all of these things, where did you do this. Where did you point this out to me? Just like on the other things with exclusions. Okay? And generally, I will tell you those suits have a very, very high percentage of finding people with full coverage that way. Okay.
I appreciate your comment tonight. I've got a two-part question. One is that my home is a legal two-family home, and I have discovered, because of the storm, that my coverage is different than it would be on a one-family home. That there is an automatic depreciation of the building. That just comes right off the top, no matter how much damage there was compared to a single-family home. And even though the home isn't going to be used as a two-family home, I still am losing almost 19%.
You want to take this?
What would you guys say?
So the difference in your policy is that FEMA has a dwelling form and a building form. If your home is a two-family home that you're living in and you're using as a single-family home, it should have been written under a dwelling form, not a building form. It is, and again, in a specific situation, I have to see the building. Is there two separate meters? Is there two separate entrances? Who's occupying it? Is it your family?
Yes.
So if it's your family and you went to your agent, I can buy a 3-bedroom or a 3-unit home if I'm using it as a home for one family. It's what the occupancy is. So it may be a 2-unit or a 2.
But there is a separate entrance.
The building component is relevant, but it's also the occupancy of the dwelling. So I don't know when you purchased your policy whether you said, we're going to live downstairs and we're going to rent upstairs. So if you went in and you said, I bought a house, this is where we're living, we should have a dwelling form. And that's something that you're going to go to your agent and you're going to say, why do I have a building form instead of a dwelling form?
Is your agent, in your case, is your agent the same agent for your homeowners and your wind policy? Okay. Well, in that case, I'd say, where's your insurance?
Very interesting. And I was also told that there is a limit to what that the flood insurance will pay. I have contents coverage, and I didn't get the maximum, which is $100,000. And I understand now that if I had gotten that $100,000, I would have been all of my contents would have been covered at replacement value. Since I was honest and said that my contents covered $25,000, I only get. I get replacement value and I can't. Well, whatever it is, I get the lower amount.
All of these amounts are negotiable between your insurance company and you. If you have a dispute, generally these things, they try to depreciate things, and generally this is how we deal with it. We get our own estimates, they don't agree with our estimates, and then we negotiate out a settlement. And that's generally how it should work.
They're telling me that my clothing was worth $500.
It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what they say. When they say, your stuff is worth this, you can't get anything more than that, that's not true. Okay? When they say this is how much your stuff is worth, you can respond, says you.
So they put in their whatever it is, their report, their estimate, and I then have to dispute it.
You have to, or either you have to go out and do it, or have somebody go out and do that for you, and send it to them and hold them to the deadlines. And then, when they don't pay you, because they will not, when they don't pay you, then you can go do it. Now, the alternative is, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can handle it yourself, and you can do that, or you can have somebody else to go in. And generally, if you don't get a hard no from your insurance company, and a lot of times they try to stretch that hard no out because they want to lead you along and bleed you out, is what the terminology that they do. They bleed you out. And they want to do that with you until you're weaker and then get in and try to get you a settlement. While they're doing that, the way you can turn the tables on them is you get people in there to do the estimates that hold them to the deadlines, and then when they miss the deadlines, now you have leverage, because what happens when they miss the deadlines, you got to use it to your advantage and your own estimates to your advantage, because when they miss the deadlines, this happens to me all the time with the insurance companies. They'll say your client is owed $100,000. And I say, well, I think my estimates are 300. And they may be high. That's my job, to be an advocate. That's what they're doing. So what I do is I show them the form. I say, Mr. Insurance Adjuster, you missed the deadline. So now you can go with your numbers or you can go with my numbers. But if you go with your numbers, tell your boss you missed the deadline and that you owe penalties and attorney's fees. And then all of a sudden he's going to look at your numbers more. Okay?
The other thing that I just wanted to say is that I was told by the city of Long Beach that a couple of days after the storm that the sewer pumps failed before the flood.
Mm-hmm.
So that any sewage damage that anybody has is caused by the sewage problem, not the flood problem.
That is a depends answer. It depends on your policy. And so you'd have to know specifically, because sometimes there's exclusions for that. So it's like walking through, this is a little bit like walking through a minefield. Okay, and I want to here give you as much information that I can, and not this to be, pitchy that, hire this guy or get somebody to do it for you. But in reality there is a big minefield that you have to walk in. And there is a lot of ways you can categorize your damage. There's a lot of ways. And some ways, legitimately, you can categorize it, which will fall into an exclusion. And some ways you can categorize it that fall into coverage. And so you have to be proactive in doing that. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Governor. This again is on the sewer backup. My agent says I'm covered. The insurance company says you didn't stuff down the toilet paper, and that was it. So where do I go from here?
What they're doing is civilly illegal, and I would document it, that's what they told you. That they told you that you failed to mitigate it by doing that. I'd send them a letter. And then that would be very helpful to somebody like me. And I would record that your agent told you this in a letter to them, or have somebody do that for you. If you have a friend who's a lawyer, okay, it would be very good that letter come from a lawyer, because the letter from a lawyer is confidential. Anything that you say, they record and they can hold it against you. So that could be another thing that would be very, very advantageous in your scenario. Okay? Okay, so the way business interruption works is that it has to be tied to a covered loss. So somebody has to go in and find damage that's not excluded in your policy, which would have interrupted your business. Now, there can be 5 things of damage that happen: wind and flood, and other things, sewage backup, and all of these things. As long as one is covered, then that should kick in your business interruption insurance. And you need someone to make, you need to make that argument or have that argument made for you.
I had Fidelity's price adjuster who worked on the claims in my house on November 20th, sat down with me and I have a split. So my kitchen and bedroom is upstairs, and you have to take one step up to my first floor. But if you come in through the front door, you have a choice to go upstairs or downstairs. But you have to step up from the garage to get into the first
very, you know, all of these loopholes and all of this stuff, and they're not your good neighbor anymore. That's an issue with your agent. Again, is that
he's fighting it for me.
yes, and he needs to fight it for him, because you can say to him, look, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter whether I have your insurance coverage, or this insurance company, or that insurance company that insures me. Doesn't make a difference. In fact, you can decide. And that's a situation, because what you're talking about, and the question had to do with, it's very complicated as to your flood coverage, what it means. And when,
Do they go out there with a ruler?
generally, the agents don't know it.
Because
Even the
I
agents don't,
in
even,
2006, I was penalized because of this, and I was charged a premium because of this.
yes.
And now they're calling my second floor, my first floor, and this a basement, even though you have to go up to get into it.
And that's why I was telling you, is that because policies of insurance are complicated, and because you have an agent that gets paid to do it, it's like the lawyer. It's like you trying to go, it's exactly the same thing. You going into court before a judge with a document this thick, never gone to law school, arguing about what it means, and what the legislature said it meant, and what this company said it meant. Okay? Your agent has insurance for giving you advice about policies. If he gives you the wrong advice about policies, and it's obvious, like the basement issue, you didn't buy flood coverage for your roof, that kind of a thing. Yes, yes. But in situations where, because of that, you may not have coverage, and you should have had this coverage instead of that, or he should have offered it to you, then you can have coverage under his insurance policy. Good. And there's more specifics, you know, about
I just want to make a couple of points. One, when Joan asked earlier about dates or timelines, your FEMA policy or flood policy, the policy itself has a 60-day time limit, and the state has, or FEMA has extended that to a 1-year period. So if you have a number, it's not that you're fighting it or appealing it, you're just giving them your claim. Almost basically everybody that talked said what they're telling me, what they're telling me, what they're giving me, what they're doing to me. It has to do a complete 180 and be, here is my claim, here is my data. You're presenting it to them. You're not standing there and sitting back and saying, now what are you going to do? Where are you going to keep me now?
that's right.
It's, you need to turn around and say to the good old boy who's coming from Alabama, no. Okay? You may replace your trailer for $34,000, but I can't replace my deck on the beach for that money. Not paying a licensed contractor who's going to do the job right. You owe me because I paid you and you sold me something. And you don't know what it costs to do something up here. They're using a database from the day your loss happened. Everything went up. So where's the adjustment for that? That's why your builder, your estimator, who you bring out, who's going to document a loss, they're going to document what it costs to fix. Because you can go to Colonial Claims and say, okay, so send your builder in here to fix it for that money. And they're going to say, we don't do that. So change the philosophy and present your claim and fight your claim.
My claim went in to Allstate flood in S2 and I received a couple of advances, and my claim has been closed recently, and it's a lot less than I was expecting. I knew ahead of time that I would get content because I went through this last year with Irene. I already had Serpro there, the meter, and it was already looked up when the adjustment came. A couple of things. I recently Because I figured, well, that's a little height wall, and some of those things. And it's a week later, I was waiting for this, the house to vote in a couple of weeks, maybe a week, before I called them to follow up. That was one thing, so I'm wondering how to handle the situation from here on now that I have sent my supplemental receipts in. My adjuster, who's a real clown, told me, oh yeah, they're gonna pay you. You'll get everything you send in, the difference of everything you send in. Compared to what they pay me, my estimates over that, minus what they pay me, is what I should get. And then there were, they pay for the sheetrock, they don't pay for the tape, they don't pay for the spackle. What about all that? And then that they don't take care of the floor, and this is all sewer backup, and I don't read the details of my plan. Let's see. And then there's the depreciation on my oil burner. They don't pay for the install, but they pay for
Yeah.
the piece of equipment depreciated, so I got a whole like $1,500 or $1,600 for a job that cost me $10,000 after I got burned from one heating company, and then had to get another one, and I'm still not filed because the second one ripped me off and didn't want to take the job. I have a whole list.
Okay, well, and basically they all fall into this category, that what Jeff was saying. They're telling you. You need to tell them. You need to get the estimates, you send it to them, you document the date that you sent it to them, and if they miss the 15 days, tell them, you heard about they're supposed to respond to you in 15 days, you have my receipts, where's my check? Did you say yes or no? Because you have my receipts, and if they don't send it to you, you documented that.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I ask you one more?
Sure.
Two more. So, is it too late? Like, would I be better off getting a private adjuster at this point?
Yes. My recommendation is that if you don't have a contractor that you trust, the first person I'd go to is the contractor that you trust to do your estimate. The problem is those people are going to be very busy right now. But to the extent that you can get one, that's the first. And here's why. Because an adjuster that's coming from out of state is guessing what it's going to cost. He doesn't know exactly. The best evidence of what your damage is the person that's going to fix it. And so those receipts of a contractor are your best evidence. If you can't get that, then I would recommend that you bring someone in to do that for you.
So I have a licensed contractor, he'll give me anything I need. But I had him not meeting you first, give me a receipt only for what I knew they were going to cover, supposed to cover.
No.
So can I send
Yes,
another receipt?
absolutely. You send them a supplement, and if you find more damage, you send it to a supplement again and again and again. I've done this 5 years after the fact, after I've preserved the claim. So you can do that. So the answer is yes.
I'm also putting in for, can I also now put in for homeowners?
Yes,
To cover the contents of it?
absolutely.
Now, would they pick up on us since they took cover for sewer backup? Can I do a duo on
Yeah.
the flood or both?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hi, John. I'm with Price Water. We had earlier, and this is a very warm welcome because if an attorney welcomes you into town, that means you seem very, very sincere. So, getting back to, you talked about causation. When they were talking about like the sewer backup, and I've got some testimony of people's homes moving in the wind before the surge hit. Is there any chance that some of that movement would be causation for the wind?
100%.
Okay.
100%. In fact, if you have eyewitness testimony, and this goes for everybody, because it's a very good point that's being made, you get to tell them the evidence. And that's for the overall of what we're saying is you get to tell them what it is, and they have to dispute it. So if you have eyewitness testimony, they didn't have, unless an agent, what insurance company is it?
This one happened to be Allstate.
Okay, so unless the Allstate adjuster is standing there and looking in the wind, then your evidence is going to be better than that. And if you package it for yourself and your other clients in the right way, you give them all of the evidence. As lawyers, and I think people will relate to this, but lawyers, we generally do things at the last moment if we can. Like insurance companies, sometimes we'll push it off, do it at the last moment. We try to get all of our evidence before we send it to the insurance companies. With this, the game is different. When you take all that time to do discovery for your clients, and not until you're absolutely certain do you send it to them. With this, because of the time frame, it's flipped. What you do is you send it all to them now, get them to miss the deadline, and then when they miss the deadline, you have leverage because your clients are going to have to pay your attorney's fees.
We've done that. Right away, we send in a letter saying what's going on, so we start the engagement at the time we talk right away. And one more, I don't know if this is maybe for Jeff or John, but we also have some situations, by the way, a lot of the people in the room are my clients, and probably in another 100 clients, we're done, we're going to be full. So when I say you're welcome, you're really welcome. And most of the public adjusters are kind of a mom and pop shop in town. They were done 300 claims ago. And from what I've heard from MetLife, there's going to be over 400 claims here. So you guys are going to be here for 2 years in my prediction. Getting back to the question, some of my clients, the agent wrote very, very clearly and distinctly first floor and second floor. And then later the FEMA is coming in because it's anywhere between 3 and 6 inch step down. They're calling it basement. But what if it was underwritten by the agent as first floor?
Well, that's what I mentioned to you before, is that if they sold a policy, a flood policy, and they're now claiming it doesn't, that insurance policy doesn't cover it, then the agent, the insurance company for the agent for screwing up, for selling a useless piece of junk, you either ask them, did you intentionally steal my money, or did you do it by mistake? You're going to ask them, you know, and I've asked that in depositions to them. Say, did you do it on purpose and take their money for something that doesn't, or did you make a mistake? There's only one of two things. Because it doesn't cover it, according to you. Because it either covers it, or you made a mistake, or you stole their money. And in all of those cases, an insurance company is going to come in to step in for them. Oh, go ahead.
One other thing, when you're saying we have flood, we have backup sewage drains, and we have wind damage, you may want to separate all of your damages. For example, if I go into the house and I'm upstairs and there's nail pops and there's cracks in the drywall and some water came in and there's a little bubble on the paint, forgetting the fact that it's flooded, what's the repair for that wind damage? It's to repair the drywall, it's to open the drywall and take out the wet insulation and treat the mold and dry and close it up and patch everything up and paint, not the nail pop. So say there's no flood, have an estimate written specifically for that damage, all inclusive. You're painting the whole room, you're doing everything, you're moving the furniture. Forget that it's flooded and damaged. You're writing an estimate specific to that specific damage, and you're entitled to the undisputed ACV of that damage up front, regardless of other factors.
It's a very, very, very good point that Jeff is making. And if you all understand that, is that when you get your contractor, you have him give you two separate estimates. One for wind and one for flood. So he's got to separate it out for you. And his estimate of his causation, he generally knows your house, he knows the area, he knows the cost better than any adjuster from out of town. So the good news is, and you can tell your clients this, is that out of about 1,000 property owners that I've represented, I've only had to go to take them to court twice. If you do it right, and if you hold their feet to the fire, they will generally pay.
Okay, one last question again, causation. Another thing that happened in this community have testimony from LEPA, is that there was, the wind also blew out some substations, and we had some power outages, again, before the surge. Even, I see some city people in here tonight also. Even some people are saying that they were getting sewer backup before the surge, or there's some pumps, some of them very, very commercial or industrial screen, some pumps were wiped out because of the power surge or the power being cut. Would that qualify as causation?
Yeah, yes, it will. And if you're able to show that and weaving in out of the exclusions, then you get it.
I've got your email, so I really hope you guys stay for a long time, because I know the Florida law and Louisiana law is a lot better than our law, so if you guys can stay and help.
It's going to be, what's happened is in New York, the laws, your statute has not been tested very much. It's one of the least tested statutes I've seen in the country. And that's now going to change. There's going to be 10,000 claims or more, in my estimation, that are going to be looking to that. So it'll be persuasive. Sure.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'll try to make this quick. I have a flood insurance policy, and on the declaration page, under contents, it says basement and above. And when I presented that to the agent, they said, well, that's an error. We never give you contents in the basement. It's just an error. Read page 12, paragraph 37, line 1,907.
Do you have the letter? Did he say to you on the phone it was a mistake? Or? Yeah. Okay. Well, I would follow it up saying, thank you that you made a mistake. Again, it's okay if you want me to send your insurance policy to me or cover me under mine. You have a choice.
Okay. And then another quick question. I have a basement, two-story house and an attic. And when they were looking at wind damage, I said, look up there at the peak. You have all this sea foam up there. And they said, oh yeah, well that was due to the flood. And I said, well, excuse me, but it's not on record that the water was that high.
Yeah.
So I'm in the process of sort of disputing that. How do I hold my
I will tell you, these stories of the insurance companies of what they've told you, I've been hearing crazy ones. I'm trying to document them. So what I would ask that you do for my clients is for you to, and for other times when I'm on giving a speech or talk shows, because we need to point this out to the government officials what's happening. So I would like you to, when you go to my website, there's the comment and question section, is to put some of those stories in there, because that's a perfect example of insurance fraud. That's what that is. It's no different when adjuster says to you, that was flood. Okay? It's no different than someone who has a house with no flood that wants a new couch, that takes a bucket of water and pours it on it and says it flooded here, and lies, because that's a lie. And we have been very lax in our laws about holding these insurance companies criminally responsible for insurance fraud, like they like to go after people criminally. They all have insurance fraud departments. There needs to be another insurance fraud department. Okay, and so those are very good stories and very helpful for us. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
I spoke to my insurance adjuster when he was going through the house, and he said he was an independent from Alabama. And I was talking to him about, well, I don't think this is covered, and I think that's covered. And he said, honey, I love when they call me honey. Honey, I get paid as a percentage of what I'm going to give you. So you're getting everything. I said, okay, I'll shut up now. So, and then I get the list, and he wasn't kidding. There's everything in that list. Stuff I don't even need. So, I also have a mortgage. And is that list going to go to the mortgage company? Will they monitor this construction? Because I don't want the mortgage company to require that I change my drywall because I have plaster walls.
Okay. It's a very...
Things in there that I don't even have.
It's a,
I don't want the mortgage company to require I do that.
It's a very, very good question, and those of you, I'm sure you're not the only one that's facing this issue. Most of us, like myself, have mortgages on our homes, and the mortgage company is a co-insured under the provisions of your policy. They require that in order for you to get a mortgage. And so what's going to happen is that when you get checks, if they weren't unscheduled advances, when you start getting checks, it's going to have your bank's name on it more often than not. What you need to do is you need to call the person that you took the mortgage out with. You need to tell them that you need to fix your house, and under your policy you have to mitigate your damages, because if you don't fix your house, it's going to mold or it's going to get worse. And so you have to tell them that you have to start this and to ask them to endorse the check. Now, sometimes unscrupulous mortgage companies, because they've screwed themselves up in the mortgage crisis, those companies are trying to hold on to your money and trying to keep it or force you to give it to them and not leave you enough to fix it. And so what you need to do is call them, be very nice with them, and say you need to fix your house, and please endorse the check. And that if they give you a pushback from that or a problem, you explain to them that if you fail to sign this check, and make sure you do it in writing, or have a lawyer do it in writing for you, that if they fail to do that, endorse that check, and mold grows, or you have a further problem, then they're going to be paying the rest of your mortgage for you. Okay.
They already sent me a letter with 20 pages of whatever, of what I have to go through in order to get the money from them. I haven't even got the money from them.
Right.
They want me to, put in receipts or estimates, and they're going to give me a third, and to send somebody a check, and they're going to give me a third.
Yeah.
Are
Now.
they going to check that I'm doing what this insurance adjuster did, or what
Generally, the mortgage company needs and they have the obligation to work with you, okay, and not to hold the money for ransom. But I want to address one thing you said, that the guy said he was an independent adjuster. There is a term that the insurance companies use. It's actually in the New York law that they lobbied to have the name independent insurance adjuster. Sounds like it should be an independent guy, right? No. That is the insurance adjuster that works for the insurance company. Now, just because he says to you, I get on a percentage, okay, you have to be very, very careful, because how did he get hired by this insurance company? Because he gives away money too much? No. He goes to them if he's an out-of-state guy and he says, look, I know how to hold your claims down. I know how to work these people. And when you think you're happy, I've heard this a couple times, I'm fine with the amount. I've heard that twice, probably only twice tonight. Be careful of that. Because if you haven't inspected it yourself, you may not know what the total damage is. And they may be playing games with you in the wind versus flood bucket. Remember, they're not paying for the flood money. And so they may put it in that bucket when you should have part of it from that bucket and part of it from this bucket that doesn't have the same exclusions in it. So you need to be careful. You need to be careful of that. Yes, you need it. Yeah, most contractors. This is kind of like, this is very, very special. What Jeff does, and I've known Jeff for over a decade now. Jeff has got more experience than as a public adjuster than he's been doing this for a very, very, very long time, 2 decades or more. And he's very, very expert in determining what's wind, what's flood, and these things. And he has people and engineers and all that stuff to be able to make that case for you. But you're right. is that your contractors haven't seen this before. Generally, they have experience with things they've seen before. And so you need to do that. And remember, you may be okay with the money, but if you don't get it in expected, you're going to lose. Most of the time, you're going to leave money on the table. You're going to leave money on the table.
He said to me today, I spoke to him, he sent me all the paperwork, he wants me to notarize and get it back to him right away, so that way, right away, it's going to do this.
Yes.
So what he said to me, I was asking him this question, but I'm asking you now about the mortgage company, whatever, and he said, don't worry about that, just sign it.
Yeah, just sign it, yeah. Famous last words. Do not, make sure you're not required, you're required to sign proofs of loss. You're required to sign things you send to them. You're not required, remember that was one of the 5 things you need to know, you're not required to sign a release. You're not required, they should never ask you to sign a release unless you have a dispute over the damage and you're coming to some compromise. That's the only time they're allowed to ask you for a release. Okay.
So everybody's familiar with auto insurance companies, how they penalize their drivers, they put them in the cyclist pool, worst case they drop it. For those of us who are paying this from Irene and Sandy, in case it's in by the water potential, a little more than a year, we're getting recourse, we're getting excited, we're probably we sort of glad, because it may well color our decision-making process. In my case, in advance, I'm really struggling. Should I go back? Should my adjustment told me come back and grind my bill? We're spending more money. And I don't know if I should go back to that second check or just pay out of pocket. Because our assessment is insurance companies we agree with really going to drop us already. Okay. So how do you be proactive with all of it?
It's a very good question, because the fear that you have is a fear that really people that are informed about the news have. That, oh my goodness, if I use this thing that I've been paying for, then I won't have it anymore. Think about that. Okay? You need it now. You paid for it. But insurance companies, remember I just said 2 companies, the 2 biggest companies with their slogans, $1.4 billion last year. Trying to make you believe that you are in the same boat as them. That if you make a claim, your premiums go up. It's in your best interest not to take money from them. They want you to believe that it's in your best interest to pay them money and not ask for any back. Okay? And you have to understand the way insurance companies make money. With all of these tricks that they're getting you to believe, it's like insurance companies work like banks. You know, banks, you put money, if you're saving, you put money in, little, and then if you need it, you take it out, you get to take back 100%. Well, banks aren't poor people, and they pay 100% back. What insurance companies do is they operate like banks. They make the same amount of money that banks do on the float of investing your premium dollars. And then they make another wave of investment by lowballing you or making you afraid to use the premiums and the insurance that you've paid for. It's like me selling you a car and making you afraid to use it. Now, I will tell you that fear is a lie and it's unfounded. Insurance companies, remember I said, insurance companies are not subject to antitrust laws. Now, what does that mean? That means that they can collude on prices, and they do. And so your premiums that you're paying, and you want to be a good driver discount, because if you're a good driver and you don't make claims, then we can lower that. That allows us to lower your insurance. And we all say, you know what, that's how it works, right? Insurance rates have to do with the amount of claims. There's not a direct relation to that. And what they do is they collude on prices. And so, and what they'll do is they fake out insurance commissioners. After Katrina, the insurance companies went to the insurance commissioner of Louisiana and they said, biggest natural disaster in history. We are going to go broke. We're not going to be able to afford to insure New Orleans anymore because we're going to lose so much money. And so unless you allow us, Mr. Insurance Commissioner, to raise your rates 500%, then we're not going to write insurance. And they told the Louisiana Insurance Commissioner that, and they all standed united, they all colluded, and they convinced this politician to allow them to raise the rates. It didn't have anything to do with how much money they lost. The year of Katrina, they made a $50 million profit, and the year after they made that. So don't be afraid to make the claim on the thing that on the idea that they're going to drop. Because anybody that's telling you that, that's the insurance company you don't want to have. You want to drop them. And you will find another insurance company if they do that. So make the claim. If they're going to raise, they're going to go to the insurance commissioner of New York. And they're going to say, oh, there's $80 billion worth of damage, and it's all this, and we have to raise the rates here because New York, I mean, it's like Florida, it gets hit by hurricanes all the time. And if they're going to be successful in doing that, they're going to do it by collusion because there's no antitrust stuff. So there's not going to be relation to you. It's going to be relations to what we allow them to get away with when they try to raise rates. So that's the answer. Now, you also asked a question about Irene and then Sandy. You need to separate the damages. You have to have the estimate. Even though that was still going on, for those of you that have Irene claims or that you have those, you can still pursue those separately. And you have to have your people who are doing estimators for you be able to put those in the most advantageous blocks for you.
One quick question, in your remediation, you have a responsibility for that property for further damage. If it floods 5 times in a row, there's separate instances, and then you need to dry it 5 times in a row. It should be covered under each one of those claims, under each one of those occurrences.
But I guess what everybody's trying to say is they're not just singling me out as the proverbial waste card.
Let's say you never even file a claim and you're going to spend $150 grand in your own money. If they're raising the rates, they're raising their stuff.
And the law is that this is a no fault. You didn't do anything to yourself to make your house more susceptible to a hurricane. That wasn't in your hands. Where it is with if you're a reckless driver in a car. So anyway. Okay, well, how much time do we? Okay, I have 8 minutes, so we'll try to stretch them, but if we can. But like I said, for those that I don't get to, or that you have specific questions or you would like some answers to, go to the website. It's on your card, and I'll answer them all specifically.
Thank you, Dennis, for setting this up tonight. Very informative. Thank you for coming.
Billion. I'm sorry, million. Sorry, million. Yeah. So.
Correct. Now, for us as the single individuals, to go out there and fight, they're going to defend themselves with billions of dollars. Ultimately, can you tell us what was the recourse that you had down in the Gulf region? Did we file class action suits so that we as the people collectively can speak up against these insurance? I'm speaking specifically to the homeowner.
It's a good question, and here's the quick answer to it. And this was against my self-interest of my firm. My firm's was the firm that took on Big Tobacco. We were the lead law firm in the $380 billion settlement. So the short answer to your question is it doesn't matter how big they are or how much money that they have. We really do have a good civil justice system. And the other thing the Founding Fathers did is they set up a good civil justice system. So generally, if the attorneys in your area are smart, and I'm going to be working with some to tell them how to do it, you will be judged by juries in this area about how much damage and whether to believe the insurance companies or your local contractors. And there's going to be a judgment day. Now, class actions, even though my law firm is very famous for class actions, in Hurricane Katrina, I refrained from filing a class action. I was one of the only law firms in the country and in the state that didn't do it. I had 800 clients. And I personally made the decision to file each one of those cases individually. And it's how Jeff and I met, is that I hired experts on all 800 of my cases. And I took a big gamble on that. I had other lawyers that said to me, John, why are you doing that? How much were your filing fees? I said, well, they were over $1 million, just my filing fees. I said, why do you do that? You could just bundle all these clients up and file one thing and pay one filing fee. You wasted $900,000. I said, no, I don't think so. Because I'm in the same boat as my clients, because I'm on a percentage. Our interests are aligned. And I'm going to bet you, Mr. Class Action Lawyer, that we will do better than you. And as far as I could tell, we did. That we got more money because we treated every person individually. Everybody has different, needs a different expert for a different thing, has a different set of circumstances. So when you do go out for help, it's a very good question. I wouldn't go into the big lump of the class actions. There's going to be a time for that in the voting booth. When you vote your insurance commissioner, watch him. Watch your insurance commissioner. Ask about him. Find out about him. Find out whether or not he's in the pocket of the insurance companies like most of these insurance commissioners. And find out what he does. You've got really good leaders in this state. It brought you through 9/11. You did everything. They stood up for you. And you need to hold your politicians accountable. That's what you can do in the long run and the big scale for our country. But for you individually, you need to do it.
I think if you talk to enough people around here, we don't have a lot of confidence in politicians.
Yeah, well, but look, hold on. But our politicians need to hear our voice. That's how the system works, is that you have to be proactive. Because I don't trust them either. But that's why I say, you've got to look for the fact that this insurance commissioner find out what he's doing and allowing those insurance rates to rise. So you have to hold their feet to the fire. Okay. Sure.
My question's a little bit different. I live in a condo.
Okay.
Okay, and I told my insurance broker that I wanted the maximum flood coverage, which I thought I had. And I didn't really read it carefully until after the storm. I imagine a lot of people.
Yes.
When that's the vote. And I was pretty shocked to see that I had $100,000 for contacts and zero. And I called my broker, who was in downtown Manhattan, who himself was underwater, and he assured me that I have maximum coverage because in a condominium, my condo board has to buy building.
Okay.
And I had left my contacts.
Yes, and that may be the case. It's one of these, the answer is it depends. Depends specifically on your condo association on it. But to the extent that you do not have the coverage and you asked your agent for that and he didn't go out, it's his obligation to do it. Because I'll bet you, even though you read it closely, your policy right now, it's really difficult to read, even if you actually read it. And it's really complicated, even for a seasoned lawyer. So you need to rely upon the agent. So if the agent makes a mistake.
Well, I was suspicious of the agent, but subsequently I read the standard condo master policy.
Okay.
Okay. And that is indeed what our building has. And in fact, the $250,000 building max, the time for number of apartments is exactly the coverage we have.
Good. That's it. Then yes, right.
So it sounds
Yep.
like he's correct.
Yep.
However, now I'm dealing with the board, okay, who has no understanding of what coverage they bought for the community, and is telling me I have zero building coverage unless I bought it for myself.
Okay, well, you need to demand, because you've been paying it, a copy of your policy. Okay, and then you have the rights to pursue the amounts under that particular policy. And if they don't give it to you, have a lawyer write them a letter.
It's like variation to this. The board concluded to fully demolish apartments that had 3 feet of water there's a complete lack of clarity as to who should be responsible.
The answer is very specific, but if you go, you ask me that, and I look at what policies you have, I'll be glad to look at it and give you some advice. Your board needs to understand, or somebody needs to tell them that, is they have to also act in, they have a fiduciary obligation to the people. Okay. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Okay. Okay.
I have like content policy. I have very high-end integrity credit. They're telling me that they want to salvage company court. And they're telling me I have housing to salvage company court. I've held up multiple times. I don't have roof stars anymore. I need to open floors. What do I...
You don't have to wait. If you don't have to wait on them. There's this misconception that if you didn't take a picture of it, or you don't have the receipt, or that kind of thing, that's not, they don't make those rules. They're trying to make those rules, but that's not what the law is. You're able, if you don't have to wait. If they don't come in time and you give them notice of what you're doing, you actually have an obligation under your policy to mitigate your damages. And mitigate your damages means act in a way that doesn't cost you more money. So you have that absolute right, despite what they say. Yes. But yeah, just take as Jeff said, take photographs of it and that kind of thing to be able to provide the documentation to them. Okay. How are we doing? We're good. Okay. All right. I'll stay around for a little bit until they kick us out. But I want to thank you all for inviting me. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. As you can see, each of your individual cases need individual attention. So, thank you for coming. I'm thinking about doing something. I know you're going to be talking with people. In terms of increased cost compliance and mitigation.
Okay, all right, hold on.
Just give me 30 seconds.
Yeah, so, but
Thank you very much.
See if we can get some speakers to speak
Just
on
get
those
these three to tie and then we're ready to put them in the back and we're done.